Hello humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I do videos on creepy and disturbing things, and today it is the day that we've all been waiting for, or maybe dreading, because now that it's over, we're all sad. This is the last and final part to the Do Not Research Iceberg series. Today we are covering tier 6 and 7 together. Thank you all so much for going on this wild ride with me. This series has been so much fun to make and to research, and I'm so grateful that everybody seems to really like it, because I would really like to do more of these kind of videos in the future. We are going to get right into it, but very gratefully, today's video does have a sponsor, so we're going to pause for a quick ad break, and I will be right back. Huge thank you to NordPass for partnering with me on today's video. Did you know that if your Facebook account got hacked, hackers can then get access to all accounts linked to it? NordPass is a simple, easy to use, crazy secure password manager created by the same cybersecurity experts who built NordVPN, the advanced online security and privacy app trusted by more than 14 million users worldwide. NordPass allows you to store all your passwords in one place with just one master password, and there's also this autofill feature so that you can easily get into your account. According to NordPass's 2021 study, 49% of women use personal details or memories when making their passwords, which is really not a safe way to go about your online activities. With NordPass, you can generate more complex and therefore more secure passwords on all of your accounts because you can easily access them from one place. NordPass will also sync your credentials in up to 6 of your devices, so you don't need to type them in again and again every time you pick up a different device. Get an exclusive NordPass deal plus 1 additional month for free by going to nordpass.com/HannahTheHorrible or use the code HannahTheHorrible at checkout. Link will be at the top of the description and the pinned comment below. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there is no risk in just trying it out. Okay, so of course we are starting with tier 6 today. The first one on this tier is Coffin Birth. This one is weirdly exactly what it sounds like, but at the same time, nothing that you would expect. So when a pregnant woman passes away and during her decomposition, intra-abdominal gases sometimes cause her to essentially give birth to the fetus post-mortem. Basically, post-mortem, the woman's unborn baby will just be like naturally pushed out through her V. Of course, the baby is no longer alive either, but it is something that has been documented over time and is pretty bizarre, and pictures of it, I mean, they're all skeletal pictures, but it's wild. So this may happen if a woman passed away, but nobody knew that they passed away. Their life was either taken, and so they were in this random location where their body wasn't found for some time, and so they have found this happen to women in that situation, or just in general, if your body hadn't been found for a while. It's pretty crazy. Next is Creatonotos Gangis, which is a moth. This is a very funny looking moth. Here's a photo of it. It can be found in Australia and Southeast Asia. The males in this species of moth have a very interesting mating ritual where their butts basically inflate like balloons. It's actually their coromata, I think I'm saying that right, aka their tubular scent glands that are inflating in order to emit their pheromones needed to attract a mate. However, if you don't know what you're getting into, it's very alarming to look up pictures of this for the first time because you have no idea what it is, and it looks like this weird little alien creature. Creutzfeldt-Jakob Disease is next. If you are a hypochondriac or you just generally have a lot of health anxiety, I would strongly recommend skipping to the next one. This one is here because it's not only terrifying, but very, very sad. This is a fatal degenerative brain disorder. In fact, 70% of people that are diagnosed with this die within the year. It starts off with memory problems, you get really bad coordination, behavioral changes, that kind of thing. And then of course it evolves to full-on dementia. You also get involuntary movements, blindness, and eventually you go into a coma. And while that sounds just as terrifying as regular dementia. This one is 10 times more terrifying because this one is possibly contagious. They believe that it is possible that you can become infected with this brain degenerative disorder if you are exposed to spinal fluids or like the brain tissue of somebody that's infected. Thankfully, they don't think you can get it through like blood transfers or just like regular contact with a person. So you could still hug a loved one, you know, if they were to have this, but they do believe that there are variants of this that are contagious. So if an instrument at the hospital comes in contact with infected tissue from somebody who has this, the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control both recommend that the instrument is not sanitized, but completely destroyed immediately. Regular sanitation and, autoclaving that we do with our surgical instruments normally just may not cut it. Humans can also get a variant of this disease by eating food that is infected with mad cow disease. So if you eat food that's infected with mad cow disease, instead of getting mad cow disease, you get a variant form of this disease. Like I said, if you have health anxiety, I really hope you skipped this one. Decomposing fetus story. This is another gross story from Reddit that is allegedly true. Watch Wang's video. He seems to have videos on most of the topics that we've covered in this iceberg, and he reads through the whole story if you're curious about it. It's really hard to find the actual original post to read yourself, so if you do want to see the full thing, I would just go to his video. But basically, somebody on Reddit claimed that they dropped out of nursing school a mere 1 hour after being in the ER because of this occurrence. She claimed that on this night, the first day that she went to the ER for nurse training, a 700-pound woman came into the hospital complaining of stomach pain. When they go to investigate her under area, they found out that she had actually been pregnant. She didn't know it. She made the baby without knowing it. And then the baby literally got stuck in her V due to her large size. And allegedly, the baby had started inside of her V because she didn't know that she had miscarried, and so this nurse quit. If you do read the full story though, just a warning that the OP is really mean. I'm actually really glad that this woman did not become a nurse, because the comments that she made about this woman over and over in her post were just so unnecessary and so insensitive. She literally calls the woman a quote unquote fat tub of lard 3 or 4 times in the story. And then she also goes on to imply that this woman did not deserve medical attention or even love from a man because of her weight. Literally, she said in the story that this woman found a man desperate enough to fuck her. Wow, lady, you would have been the worst nurse of all time. First of all, I have been in the nurses several times, one time for over 2 weeks, and let me tell you that nothing disgusts nurses. This happening, yes, it is objectively absolutely disgusting, but I can almost guarantee that the seasoned nurses in the room were yeah, that's gross, but this is a patient and we need to take care of them. And secondly, everybody deserves medical attention when they need help, even if they're fat. Even if their fat supposedly caused the problem. And thankfully, a lot of people in the comments did call out OP for being so just cruel in her post, and also people saying I'm really glad you didn't become a nurse, because that just increases the fat phobia that already exists in our medical system and makes people in larger bodies afraid to seek care. So it's okay. Anyway, yes, the story is gross, but that's not actually what disturbed me about that one. Elephantaisis is the next one. This is another disease that will unfortunately severely disfigure anybody diagnosed with it. And sadly, not only that, but causes just awful pain as well. You've likely seen it before, or at least pictures of it. It's people that have one very, very large leg that's 4 times the size of their other leg. That's actually not not fat being stored or anything in one leg. That's this particular disease. There's also a picture of this poor man who ended up with this in his scrotum. Even more sad, this can actually happen to anybody. People get this by being bitten by infected mosquitoes. Mosquitoes that were infected with roundworm parasites are able to transfer this disease to humans. It mostly affects people in subtropic and tropic areas like Asia, Africa, Western Pacific areas, part of the Caribbean, and South America as well, and luckily it is pretty rare. Euphoria, the visual novel. Oh boy. We've talked about visual novels before on this channel, a great example that most people know being Doki Doki Literature Club. They're fictional stories, but they're more interactive, so they're kind of like video games, but also little novels. Euphoria is an extreme type of visual novel that was created by the company ClockUp. It was first released in 2011 on Windows. I did not purchase it, of course. It was like 45 or 50 bucks, but I did, however, play the demo, and wow, so much regret. I mean, to put it bluntly, all in all, it's just a game, but that with a lot of very, very hardcore violent stuff included as well. But yeah, it's very graphic, very extreme. The basic story is that a teacher and a bunch of his students, and I think one other teacher, so there's like 1 male and 6 female students in Japan, they all wake up and they discover that they've been put in this big white room, and then this random voice over the speaker tells them that they are going to have to play a game, and that if you don't participate in the game, you will be eliminated, Squid Game style. So yeah, Harlequin Babies. We kind of touched on this one in the last tier when we were talking about the associated skin condition. This one again is just a medical condition that is way more sad than it is disturbing. So babies will get this sometimes before they're born, and it's pretty much always so severe that they don't survive long. Photos of it are incredibly sad. The pictures of the newborns with it, they don't even look real. I think I said in the last video that they look weirdly like little dolls because they just look so affected by this. Honestly, babies with less severe forms that do survive and are older are actually very cute to me. They just look a little different, but they don't look like the newborns. Yeah, mostly for that one, I just feel really bad for parents that were expecting to have a new baby and then the baby doesn't survive because of this. Like, that's not fair. Heat death of the universe. Okay, so according to Wiki, the heat death of the universe is also generally referred to as the big freeze or the big chill. And quote, it's a hypothesis on the ultimate fate of the universe, which suggests that the universe would evolve to a state of no thermodynamic free energy and would therefore be unable to sustain processes that increase entropy. Remember how earlier we talked about the second law of thermodynamics and how the universe can only get, by this logic, can only get messier and messier. Well, the heat death of the universe is basically saying that eventually the universe, the entire universe, will get so messy that there's nowhere else to go. Going back to Reddit explain like I'm 5, there was a good explanation from a deleted user. Too long didn't read. Most of the reason stuff happens in the universe is because energy is trying to reach an equilibrium. This is why hot things cool down and cold things warm up. Eventually, everything in the universe will reach this equilibrium, so nothing will happen anymore. And basically, the entire universe will become a blank void. So yeah. Klismaphilia. This is people that are very into enemas. Like, they become very, very aroused specifically by using enemas. For most of us, this sounds just very unpleasant. If you don't know what an enema is, it's when you take a hopefully sterile saline solution and you basically squeeze it into your rectum to flush out your rectum. It is used in medical settings very frequently in preparation for certain types of colon surgery, so they need to be able to see up there and, you know, for other stuff. Anyway, for people using it for pleasurable purposes, I mean, you do you, you're not hurting anybody else. However, I do advise extreme caution, and I don't recommend doing this either, because it sounds like people that do this do it pretty frequently, and it can probably be dangerous doing it too much. So Just FYI. The next one is Osteo-odonto-keratoprosthesis, aka, and what we'll be referring to it as OOKP, also known as tooth in eye surgery. This one is absolutely bananas, but also like low-key super amazing and cool. So it's a procedure that helps restore vision in patients that are going blind. They take a tooth from the person or from a donor in order to do this procedure. This is how they do it. You can pause the screen to read about the procedure if you want to know the basic steps. I'm not going to try to explain it fully myself because it would take a long time and I probably won't explain it well. But people that have had this done, the pictures of it are just absolutely bizarre. Eyes that have had this procedure done look really different. They just look like a big white eye, like the whole eye is white, like you don't have your iris and your everything, and it's just got a black dot in the middle. So it looks very, very interesting. However, I have to say, if it restores your eyesight and that's what you want, then who cares what it looks like? Because if it were me, I would totally trade a normal looking eye to get my eyesight back. Shiro, Ishii, and Unit 731. Shiro Ishii was a Surgeon General, a microbiologist, and the director of Unit 731, which was a biological warfare unit of the Imperial Japanese Army. They did absolutely horrific and unimaginable experiments on actual humans. Most of them were Chinese people, and most of the time they were babies, men, and pregnant women. Ishii and his staff made just these crazy concoctions of pathogens: anthrax, the bubonic plague, smallpox, botulism, among many other things, and then forced prisoners to consume it, either through their mouth, their nose, being injected with it, you name it. They did this literally just to see what would happen. The Japanese army were then also provided with biological warfare from this Unit 731. And with this warfare, they would contaminate the water supply of their enemies. They would drop infected wheat from airplanes and also just release infected fleas. There are tons of other awful experiments that were done on the people that were subjected to this, and I do suggest go with caution if you plan on reading more, but the details are, a lot of them are on Wikipedia. So Ishii, knowing that what he did was absolutely heinous, went into hiding and tried to fake his own death in 1945. But that didn't work. We found him and America went after him. He ended up getting full immunity of all war crimes, and that was because he promised America that he would provide them with the materials and the results of all his experiments. And since America couldn't do these experiments, they didn't do it, so at least they could get the results and all the information and knowledge from Ishii. So they agreed. Ishii did give them materials, but it ended up not being very helpful. There wasn't much info in there, and Ishii was a free man. He died at the age of 67, again, completely free, and the Japanese government has yet to acknowledge the heinous things that Unit 731 inflicted on poor innocent people. The swamps of Degobah story. This is another very disgusting Reddit story. An operating room nurse claims that she was on call one night when she was called in at about 2 in the morning for a perirectal abscess patient. This procedure, everybody in the staff apparently knew that it was going to be really gross, and so nobody was looking forward to it. This, of course, if you don't know, a perianal abscess is an infection that usually ends up in this big pus-filled pocket near the asshole. Yes, that as I've talked about before, this is something that I had the pleasure of enduring. They're awful. However, this patient that came in this night had allegedly gotten infected by using drugs and by using dirty needles in that area. The story then continues to say that as they all started the procedure and the surgeon started to go in, the infection was much further up in the abdomen than they all thought. The person then goes on to say that pus and other disgusting comes out of this woman at an alarming rate. And then the scene that is described after this is so ridiculously over the top, I honestly question if this story is true. Basically, it's described as the scene from Monty Python's Meaning of Life, as if the entire operating room was covered from floor to ceiling with disgusting human byproduct, and that everybody in the room, all of the surgical staff, started vomiting into their masks and or passing out as the entire floor was just covered with this. The rest of the story is just very, very in-depth and more graphic details as to how this all happened and what the surgery room looked like, how they resolved the situation and eventually cleaned it up, and the smells and yada yada yada. If this is a true story, I would bet my money on it being quite embellished. And again, just like the other story we talked about a few minutes ago, if this is a true story, I feel so bad for the patients at this hospital. They talk about how the nurses are all talking about how disgusting the patient is when they can't hear them, and again attributing all this to their weight and then the just implied judgment of their drug use when they're afflicted with an actual addiction, which is a disease. Like, obviously this patient is not well. Again, you can skip to the next one if you don't want to hear me rant about this. I totally understand. But if you do want to listen to me rant for a second, here it is. I just want to stress that not all hospital experiences are like this. If this story is in fact true, which I have a feeling that some version of it is true, I have gone into the hospital for this, like I said, this exact reason, other than the fact that it wasn't because of drugs, it was because of my Crohn's diagnosis, and I had an amazing experience. I never heard any inkling of anybody talking behind my back, even though, I guess they could talk about patients behind their back, but if they did, I had no idea. All the nurses were incredibly kind. The reason that I think this story is embellished or maybe not true, now, granted, this could be a very different type of hospital in a different culture in a different time. So I'm not saying that it's not true because of this, but at least in my experiences, I've had extensive experience in this particular procedure. You don't go to some random surgeon. You get a colorectal doctor specifically to do this procedure on you. You need a specialized surgeon to do this. It's not a general surgeon, at least where I went. And so not only is the doctor extremely used to this stuff, and even if this happened to him, my doctor at least was wonderful enough that this would not have fazed him one bit, but all the nurses that work with those doctors are also very used to this. There's no shaming involved. They make sure you're comfortable. They know how painful and how awful the ordeal is and how disgusting the ordeal is for you, and they certainly don't shame you for it. The other thing about this story is she talks about how they put this woman under because she was in so much pain, like while they were still wheeling her around the hospital, which again, maybe this is just a hospital I'm not familiar with. I am not a professional, so, take this with a grain of salt. But again, that seems very odd to me. For all the procedures I have been through, several surgeries, colonoscopies, and amongst many other things, never once have they even been close to putting me under before I was literally about to start the procedure. The doctor comes in to talk to you, the nurse comes in to talk to you, the anesthesiologist comes in to talk to you, you sign a ton of forms, they make sure you're comfortable with everything, and they are not putting anything in your IV other than regular fluids before you are actually about to be cut or the procedure is about to be done. So that part, again, maybe it's just a different hospital than I'm used to, but that just seems very weird to me. I say all this, again, if you are still here listening to me rant, I say all this because I really don't want people to be afraid to go to the ER. I was very afraid to go to the ER, and it almost cost me at least my colon, my entire colon, if not my life, if I had not finally gone when I wanted to, because I didn't want to be dramatic. I was scared of the hospital, and in the end, I had no reason to be scared. They took amazing care of me. Granted, I've never been in a bigger body, so I don't know what it's like to have the inherent fat phobia that I'm sure comes with a lot of hospitals, but I still don't want stories like this and the way that nurses are telling these stories to make people afraid to go to the ER. If something is wrong, just go, because odds are the nurses you get are going to be wonderful, just like 99.9% of nurses are, and the doctor will also not be disgusted. That's why I hate stories like this. Rant over. Okay, the next one is the cameraman's revenge. This one is actually probably not what you're thinking. This one's pretty fun and not disturbing. This one is just bizarre and surreal. Like, whatever you're thinking it is, it's even more bizarre than that. This is a stop motion animation all the way back from 1912, so exactly 100 years ago, and it was made in Moscow. However, it's a 13-minute film and it's up on YouTube with English subtitles if you want to check it out yourself. The characters in the little 13-minute film are bugs, and they actually used dead insects as the puppets in this stop motion animation. It's actually pretty incredible. So the story follows Mr. and Mrs. Beetle. They are both bored and getting restless in their marriage and in life in general. Mr. Beetle goes to the gay dragonfly nightclub, which, remember, back then they probably used the word gay as happy, so I don't think Mr. Beetle was gay. I think the nightclub was just a fun nightclub. Anyway, Mr. Beetle goes to see his favorite dancer, and he pushes a grasshopper out of the way in order to get to her. The dancer is a dragonfly. Little does Mr. Beetle know, the grasshopper he pushed out of the way is the dancer's ex-boyfriend and also a cameraman. Grasshopper follows Mr. Beetle and the dancer to Hotel de Mort, and he films them together through their keyhole. The film then cuts to Mrs. Beetle, who is also cheating. She is cheating on her husband with her artist friend. Mr. Beetle comes home and catches his wife embracing the artist friend, and a fight ensues. However, Mr. Beetle ends up forgiving his wife, and so he takes her to a movie to show her that all is forgiven. But little does he know, the projectionist at the theater is none other than the ex-boyfriend Grasshopper, and the movie they go to see is of Mr. Beetle cheating on his wife. So it closes out with Mrs. Beetle starting to beat her husband over the head, since all along he was cheating as well. You have to go watch the full film to really immerse yourself and understand the full thing, but I have to say, impressive and probably something you've never heard of. Traumatic insemination. This one is bad, but not as bad as it initially sounds because it does not involve humans. This is not one about people, but actually, again, another one about insects. This is a form of mating in some invertebrates, bedbugs being the most prime example of this, as they are known to only mate specifically through traumatic insemination. In this ritual, the male bedbug pierces the female bedbug's abdomen and injects his sperm directly into her that way. It's really, really hard on the female bedbug, as you can imagine, and often causes infections. Homosexual and interspecies traumatic insemination have also been observed in some other species of insects, fascinatingly enough. Nature is ruthless, man. Vladimir Komarov's funeral image. I can't show this photo because it is technically human remains and YouTube does not like that. But it's a very easy image to find, and I personally don't think it's that upsetting. This is a real image of the late astronaut Vladimir Komarov. He literally fell from space in 1967, and there's a photo of what his body looked like after sustaining this ordeal because he had an open casket funeral. As terrifying as this is, I know a lot of you are going to go rush to go look this picture up, and actually in very, very few cases in this series, I actually encourage you to do so if that kind of stuff doesn't freak you out too much, because it's actually really interesting. How many times do we get to see what happens to a body when they pass away in such a manner? What happened to Vladimir is that his space capsule crashed when he was re-entering the Earth's atmosphere due to a parachute malfunction. He fell from space, but he didn't technically die in space. He likely didn't pass until he actually hit the ground, and so it was probably also relatively painless and quick. But yeah, wow. The Xenomorph Wasp. This is a relatively newly discovered species of wasp that was named the Xenomorph because of its parasitic life cycle, and its behavior is very similar to the Alien franchise's monster. So this wasp must kill its host in order to complete its life cycle. In this case, the wasp will inject its eggs into a caterpillar after it fights with it, and then the baby larvae will slowly but surely eat the caterpillar from the inside out until they pretty much literally burst through the caterpillar's body. They then, of course, make cocoons around the caterpillar and continue to use the caterpillar. It's really wild. I watched a video on it, and the caterpillar has this weird thing where it then protects the larvae as they're in their cocoons. It's so bizarre. And then they, of course, grow into the wasps, and then they continue the cycle. Like I said, the videos of it are very frightening, even though I know it's nature, but still. I still feel really bad for the poor caterpillars in this situation, just minding their own business. And I am also convinced that all wasps are the spawn of Satan. Okay, that was tier 6. Let's move on to tier 7. The first topic in tier 7 are Ape Language Studies. This one was kind of tough for me, and maybe people could comment why they think this is on the list, because I did look into this quite a bit and I don't know if I have the right answer, but this is what as far as I know, this is what I think it is. So we started Ape Language Studies in the 1930s. Some of the earlier experiments involving separating baby chimpanzees from their homes, from their mothers, and then bringing them into human families to raise them alongside other children in the family as if the chimpanzee was a child. They did this to see if the chimpanzee was raised right next to a child and raised by humans, would the chimpanzee develop normal language? That, of course, failed miserably, and the chimpanzees were, of course, not able to just magically speak just because they were raised by humans, so instead they tried a different tactic. They started teaching the monkeys sign language instead. So in the 60s and 70s, they were doing more of these experiments on other primates like orangutans and other species of monkeys. And there was some proof that, in fact, some of them could learn a few hundred words in sign language and phrases. The most famous being Koko the gorilla or Kanzi the bonobo. However, all these studies also eventually failed. They really weren't able to prove that the apes were communicating in any significant way with us. A lot of the time we weren't sure if the ape was actually trying to communicate or if they were more just going off of the trainer's body language and being led to the right answers by the trainer. And then when the monkey clearly gave a nonsensical answer that made absolutely no sense for the question, then the trainer was just kind of brushed it off and explained it away and was like, oh, silly monkey. So they brushed off when it didn't work, and then they used when it kind of worked as confirmation bias. There is no doubt that the primates could learn some language, but to the extent that researchers claimed they did was just simply not true. It really shows us how weird humans are for ripping a poor baby away from its mother just for the sake of human research, and we're so conceited to think that we have to train some animals to know a human language or know English. It's just bizarre to me. Of course, I don't think we would do this today because it is recognized as just severely unethical. The Byford dolphin accident. In spite of all the dolphin topics we've talked about in this series, this one is surprisingly not about a dolphin. The Byford dolphin was actually a drilling rig that was developed by Dolphin Drilling. A drilling rig is typically what we think of as the machinery that goes into the ocean to drill for oil. Divers that work for these oil companies do something called saturation diving, which is known to be extremely dangerous, but also very well paid. I'm going to give a very brief explanation of what happened for the sake of time. However, there's a 6-minute video that I found from a channel called Highlight History that gave a very, very concise but interesting explanation of everything that happened in this tragic accident. So I will link that down below if you are curious. Basically, there were 4 divers in the rig that day, and there were 2 tending divers outside of the rig. One of the tending divers opened the clamp, keeping the trunk sealed, before one of the divers inside closed the door to the chamber. This caused an explosive decompression event. And with that, the chamber went from 9 atmospheres to 1 atmosphere practically instantaneously. I don't know a lot about science, but I know that that is not good. All 4 divers inside the rig died instantly. Their blood basically boiled inside of their body. In spite of the horrific nature of their death, thankfully, it is thought that they died not only very quickly, but likely painlessly. The tending diver outside of the rig that caused the accident, though, was completely ripped apart. Again, thankfully, he very likely did not suffer either, as it was probably so quick that he didn't even know what was happening. There are photos of this, actually. There's black and white photos of all of the bodies of the 4 men and then this tending diver as well. I don't recommend it just because it's very disturbing in nature. However, it's not crazy graphic because it's pretty old in black and white, like I said. Cancrum Oris. So this is yet another disease, but it's on the deepest tier, so get ready. This one is also horrific and just unbelievably tragic. This one is also known as NOMA, and it is a very, very severe type of gangrene that specifically affects the mouth and the face. It's very rapid, and it also is not a great prognosis for the person diagnosed with it. Even more sad, it's most common in underdeveloped countries, of course, where the sanitation is often not as good as Western cultures, and it's also most common in children. Photos of this are very upsetting. I mean, no disrespect, but the best way I can describe it is that they literally look like zombies out of The Walking Dead. Like, it does not look real. I can't imagine suffering through this. Like, how awful that this exists. Cyclopia. This is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's when a baby has a birth defect called cyclopia, where they only form 1 eye, and it's one very large eye in the center of their face. They also often don't form a nose, or if they have a nose, it's not a functioning nose. You've never seen anybody with this because babies, pretty much as far as I know, always die either in utero or very shortly after birth if they are afflicted with this. Forgive my pronunciation on this one as well. The next one is Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva. This used to be called Stone Man's disease in the past. However, I have a feeling we probably no longer use that term. This is a very rare disease where your connective tissues, like muscle, your tendons, your ligaments, turn literally into bone. There's no known cure, and there's no known like really effective treatment. So people that are diagnosed with it, even though it's rare, are just like, I mean, pretty much screwed at this point. It really sucks for anybody diagnosed because they are very much immobilized. And this is that disease that people often say is the person like kind of literally turning into a statue. They have tried surgical methods to help this. They've tried going into a place and removing some of the bone that is formed and hoping that this would at least slow the disease down and give a better quality of life for the person. But this actually completely backfired, and this can actually speed up bone growth. Patients are treated with lots of anti-inflammatories to try and like slow down or reduce some of the inflammation that they experience in their bodies. But that's about it. It's really freaking sad because people with this are often experiencing chronic pain for their whole life. The prognosis for this is that patients with this will likely pass away in their 30s, sometimes their mid-40s. This one is just not fair. Godel's incompleteness theorems. I hate this one so much. And not because it's disturbing, but just because it's another one that really messes with your head. I legit suggest you do not research this one because the headache is not worth it. Basically, this dude threw a wrench into the lives of all the people that dedicate their entire world to math. He essentially proved that there are statements that can be true but cannot be proved. And therefore, because of that, all mathematical systems are incomplete systems. I liked what the TED video on this said. They said, like, if you have a statement like this statement is false, if that statement is true, then that statement is actually false. But if it's false, then the statement is actually true. That's all I got. It's more complicated than that, obviously, but basically it's a paradox that messes with a lot of mathematicians. Maggot Baits. This is yet another visual novel, but this one was also created by ClockUp, the same one that created Euphoria, except it's in tier 7 instead of tier 6. I read a blog post about this from a person named Guardian Acorn, and they said that ClockUp was really holding back when they made Euphoria, and that Maggot Baits was the visual novel that came out of ClockUp not holding back. If you're curious to know what's in the details of this game, like you can imagine, it is Euphoria, but a billion times worse. I strongly suggest going to read Guardian Acorn's blog about it, because they include a bunch of descriptions of the scenes and random things that happen in the game, except you don't actually have to see them or see the visuals that go with it. However, I don't suggest going to even do that, and I warn you of the triggers if you do choose to even read about this. Of course, I can't really go into details of the scenes on YouTube because YouTube, but on the screen somewhere here, I'll put a list of all the things that are in this game. And it's all of these things, except it's, again, 10 times worse than that, whatever you're imagining. Run the gauntlet. Run the gauntlet comes from the phrase that back in the olden days, they would use run the gauntlet as a form of corporal punishment. A guilty person had to run between 2 rows of soldiers, and while they did so, the soldiers would whip them with various instruments and weapons, and so your punishment was running the gauntlet. What we're referring to here in the current world of the internet is a shock site / internet challenge where you run the gauntlet. You go to this website and there are 20 videos, they're all not safe for work, and they all get worse and worse and worse as you go on. You can't skip a video because the button to skip the video doesn't show up until the video you're on ends. A lot of the videos in this, are the ones that we've kind of talked about in this tier, like 1 guy, 1 jar, or the very famous one, 3 guys, 1 hammer. Now, I almost did this for the sake of this video, but then I didn't, and I will tell you why. I can handle most gore and shock videos and stuff like that by now, but I did look into what was possibly on the list, and there is one that I will just say involves an animal, and there's another one that I will say involves a person that is not old. So if it were just of the adult gore, I could probably do it, but I refuse to watch things like that and also be forced to watch it and not be able to skip it. So this was sadly a pass for me. Let me know in the comments if you've ever played this game though. Another really disturbing thing when researching this game I found on Reddit is that a 12-year-old commented and said that, well, I watched all of them, and that split glands. Again, warning to anybody who has a penis for this one. This will make you cringe in pain, most likely. This is a procedure done where the underside of the glands of the penis are surgically split. This is done in order to make the urethra bigger, essentially so the person can more easily pass urine. So I guess some people just have a really narrow urethra, or some people get injured and it causes this, and so sometimes this procedure is necessary in order to easily urinate. But of course, there's people out there that do this to themselves for aesthetic reasons, for sounding purposes, which we discussed in a previous tier. Of course, I do not recommend doing this to yourself, as it can be super, super dangerous. Never do a procedure on yourself. It's never a good idea. Strangelets. This one is so sciencey, I'm honestly not sure how I'm going to explain it. Strangelets, first of all, are hypothetical particles. Strangelets, aka strange matter, would be able to convert our regular matter on contact and consume it. We aren't sure if this is even possible, but it is theorized that if strange matter was introduced to Earth for more than a fraction of a second at our Earth's pressure, it would infect Earth, very quickly spread all over Earth, and basically consume us, killing the entire planet. I'm not comfortable trying to explain it more in depth than that, as I would probably insult a lot of scientists out there and probably not explain it correctly, and then you'd think it was something that it wasn't. It's not really something to worry about, it's just something really scary to think about, and essentially it's just another sciencey theory on a way that the Earth could end. Teratoma tumor. This is a tumor that typically forms in the ovaries, the tailbone, or the testicles. It's really creepy, and pictures of these tumors are just bananas because the tumor itself could be made up of bone, muscle, hair, and teeth. The mature type of this tumor is usually benign. However, the immature type of this tumor can be cancerous. Don't suggest looking up pictures of it. The Anthill Kids. This was a cult formed in Canada in 1977 by this guy named Rock. He was a self-proclaimed prophet and of course told all of his followers that the world was going to end. That seems like a definite pattern in most cults, doesn't it? He told everybody in the cult that being impregnated by him was required by God, and so he fathered 26 children. He told the members that God had told him specifically that the world was going to end in February of 1979. So when that date came and went and the world was fine, he claimed that God's timeline is not the same as Earth's timeline, and so therefore the timeline he received about the world ending was a miscalculation because that's what he thought God told him. Anyway, there was of course severe bad abuse going on in this group. They lived in this commune together. He would spy on the members, and then when he told them of the sins that they did that he knew about, he told them it's because God told him, when really he was spying on them. There was severe punishments for anybody who wished to leave, of course, or for anybody who didn't bring enough money in. The members would sell baked goods in order to make money for the group. He would make members their own legs with, and that's just one of the many things that he did. If you want the full details, of course, they are on Wiki, but I warn you, it's disturbing. He called all this purification sessions, and he claimed that he was just doing this to rid his followers of their sins. So he was just helping them. He then started performing surgical operations on the members, often procedures that were completely unnecessary, but he would do it just because he wanted to prove that he had healing powers. In 1989, so like 12 years after forming the cults, he ended up killing one of his members during one of these surgical operations. The details of this person's demise are extremely disturbing. So again, if you're gonna go read about this, go with caution. He was finally caught and sentenced to life in prison for everything that he did, but he died in 2011 when a fellow inmate killed him. So yeah. 2 left, you guys. This next one is vacuum decay or vacuum decay theory. This is yet another terrifying science concept, which tells us another way that the Earth could end in some awful way. I'm gonna cheat and read another Reddit Explain Like I'm 5 entry from username memepower272 because they will explain it much better than me. So you know how the universe is made up of matter within a vacuum. The vacuum is the lowest possible energy state you can have. There is a theory that the vacuum isn't an actual vacuum and is at a low energy state, but it isn't as low as it can get. So now why doesn't the universe simply become the true vacuum then, you might ask? The problem is that to do so, it would need to move to a higher energy state first. Not sure how familiar you are with chemical reactions, but it's like an activation energy. The products are going to have less energy than the reactants, but you need to add energy to the mix before the reaction can actually take place. Now suppose there was an event that were to give off enough energy to allow part of the false vacuum to jump to the lower energy state of the true vacuum. In doing so, it would give off enough energy to decay the false vacuum around it, and so on, leading to the rapid collapse of all the false vacuum and in the entire universe, along with a massive wall of energy moving around the speed of light that would vaporize everything in its path. How do we know if we're in a true vacuum or not? We don't. There's talk about our particle colliders possibly starting this reaction, but the energy released by them is much lower than other cosmic events we've observed and will not exceed those events within our lifetime. So don't worry about the doomsday scenarios, because there is an extremely low chance that they will be a problem. You're welcome. The last one on tier 7 and in this whole adventure is coldness in my heart. Surprisingly, I actually already knew what this was going into this, and it's only surprising because it's one I knew about, but it was deepest on the list. However, I do think it deserves this spot. This was a Tumblr user back in 2013 who was documenting her stuff on the blog. The photos of this exist, and it's way worse than anything you can imagine. This was not regular. This is how did she remain conscious and survive some of these wounds inflicted on herself. Now, some of the pictures associated with her ended up actually not being pictures of her specifically, I believe, and they were just kind of tacked onto her. But it doesn't really matter, because if you look her up, those pictures will come up. The creepy thing is that nobody really knows what happened to her. Nobody knows if she got help or, you know, what her fate ended up being. She obviously really needed help though, and I really hope that she got it. Our good friend, the internet investigator, did make a video specifically about her a while back, and I do definitely recommend watching her video if you're curious about the details and the full story of this Tumblr user, as she also does not include the graphic photos in her video. Tread lightly if curiosity does get the better of you and you decide to go look these up. This is not something that anybody really needs to see. Unless you're just completely dead inside, the photos of this are very likely going to gross you out and disturb you in a pretty severe way. All right, guys. That's tier 6 and 7, and that's the whole freaking iceberg. There was a 8th tier that is joke entries, and I will put that up on the screen right now in case you want to pause it and go look up any of those. I don't think any of them are particularly upsetting. I think they're just kind of funny, you know, like I said, joke entries, like, you know, obviously your name, your kid's search history. I looked up dinosaur with 500 teeth. That one was kind of funny. Or, you know, the scientific name for pigs, that kind of stuff. And so it's just joke stuff. But if you have any interest in those, feel free to go forth on your own. So yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. A while ago, as you know, I asked on a poll what other icebergs you guys might want me to cover in the future. And man, did you deliver. I got a ton of suggestions, and so I will be going through those as soon as I can to pick the next iceberg that I will do on this channel. We'll probably take a tiny bit of a break though from icebergs, at least for the rest of June. Yeah, one more announcement. In June, I am actually moving. It's very exciting. I'm just moving like 30 minutes away from where I normally live. So it's not like some major life change or anything, but I will probably only post 3 videos in June rather than 4. So I will have one more video posted either next week or the following week. I'm not sure which one yet, but I will post one more video in June, but there probably won't be 4. So yeah. That's it. Okay, please like the video to support the channel. Thank you so much to my patrons as always. Shout out to Colin Holmes, Deck of Cards, Michelle Valdovinos, Tom L, JJ, Quasi Eli, Little Kittle Cat, Whimsicott Fan, Delta Wolf 776, Mitchell Meyer, Mike Ellis Paul, Dark-Sided Otter, Brittany Phillips, JB Funk, Willow Winchester, Amanda Klein, as well as our newest Bambi and Nyanu Keanu.